right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the consequences of this idea of group guilt. And
Mm-hmm.
so the system is predicated on the idea, or was predicated originally on the idea, that the landowning class was oppressive, tyrannical, and well, they were thieves. They were immoral thieves, essentially, as an entire class. And then that class guilt became so pervasive that it wasn't escapable across generations. That's where the idea of group guilt takes societies. And how would you contrast that to what you see in the West?
It is so so unbelievable. Like, I mean, I went to school in America to university and or talk about this, I mean, America also had a slavery and like all those oppression, but now they are collectively being guilty for their history. And how many generations ago was that even? And then people still trying to punish people who were not doing it at the time. And how do you choose your ancestors? I think that's what was the hardest thing for me to be in North Korea, is that I mean, I wish I had that option to choose the things back then, but it's not within your control. And now also in America, I see these trends of people going after people whose ancestors were perhaps the like slave owners. But how is it even relevant to that individual right now who they are? It's not something they contributed back then. So this idea of like, the guilt collectively, we associate them, and I just never knew that the rest of the world was going to be also like this in a different degree. But this is something that mainly North Korea holds against its people. They literally call your blood tainted because your father, your great great grandfather did something. That means you are forever, your blood is tainted. You are not like redeemable. And almost now in America, I see that because some white people, their ancestors owned the slaves, they are like redeemable. They should be forever guilty about their privilege. And like the idea of this word guilt is also very, like, it's very hard to even look at this. And it's so heartbreaking. Why would you cause that kind of shame on other human? Why it's not their fault at all?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. But we why you would want that to happen? Um,
Mhm.
well, I think it's part of a demand for some hypothetical radical equality. I mean, it is the case that some people are born. We're all born with different advantages and disadvantages, and some of those are linked to our ethnicity and our race from time to time. And there's an attempt to, at least in principle, level the playing field, but it gets very dangerous when you try to equalize the outcomes and when you enter the realm of guilt by group. That's a catastrophe. Everywhere that's ever been instituted, it's just a complete catastrophe, because exactly the same thing happened in the Soviet Union and in Maoist China. Your family, your father in particular, but also your mother, they and many, many Koreans in the 1990s, when things fell apart so catastrophically, there was the emergency reemergence of free enterprise in some sense. It was illegal, highly illegal. But tell us what your father and your mother did to survive.
So as you said, like, in the 90s until then, so in North Korea right now, you cannot own cars, you cannot own houses. I mean, everything's private. So no private property in North Korea. You don't even own your stuff. Everything is state owned. So therefore, trading is illegal. That is a you are committing a crime. But after the 90s, the Soviet Union collapsed. People had to find their own ways to survive outside the North Korean government. So the regime created this ideology called the Juche ideology, self-reliance ideology. So they told the people, okay, you alive on your own. We are not gonna give you public distribution. You just figure out on your thing. Then like how do we figure out on thing? We don't have freedom, we cannot even trade. So people started getting into this thing called the black market. But
Right.
often
So
black market.
simultaneously, so what was happening in North Korea simultaneously was that the centralized government distribution system collapsed completely when it was no longer subsidized. And the North Korean government decided that everyone was now on their own, while simultaneously making any ownership and any trade whatsoever illegal and punishable with extreme punishments. So you were on your own, but forbidden to do anything that would get you out of your condition of starvation and privation.
Exactly. I like now I'm thinking back, people say like, oh, what were you allowed to do in North Korea? I literally sat down one day, like, what was I allowed to do on my own? literally just breathing. That is the only thing that I was allowed to do on my own. The regime literally tell you what to read, what to listen to. They even send you prison if you dance in a wrong way. If you wear jeans, they say it's a symbol of capitalism, they send you prison. If women wear like skirt, like pants, sometimes they say, oh, women have to wear a skirt. And if you watch wrong movie, and even the haircut, they tell you what kind of hair. It was a funny joke for the Westerners. I cannot believe in North Korea you have to follow the haircut line, the guidelines. That's how controlling the regime is. They intervene every aspect of your life, and literally, when there are some times when we have even electricity, they would give us this radio that we cannot turn off. We can lower the volume, but can never turn off at home. So they force us to listen to this propaganda blast.
Right, and it's stuck on one channel.
Yeah, no, there's only one channel.
And you can't move the station selector to listen to anything else. That's illegal as well.
Yes. And that's the thing, like the regime doesn't allow us to do anything, and then but let us somehow find a way to survive. And of course, that means breaking the rules in North Korea. And my father was involved in black market where he started selling dry fish, sugar, rice, clothes, clocks, and then later the metals like copper, silver, copper, and of course that was illegal, and that's how it was sent to prison camp.
Right, and so he started to trade.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned in your book that the trading, as far as you were concerned, that the trading activity that emerged as a consequence of the black market gave North Koreans their first small taste of freedom. Mm-hmm. So what do you mean by that? Why did that strike you that way?
Because trading is a very empowering act, because until then, North Koreans have to rely on everything from the regime. Like literally even the water, everything. But when we started being creative and they say, okay, I can find the corn like a cheaper price in this region and then bring it to the other region and bring maybe fabric from this region to the other region. So we start getting more control over like how we even think, how to look. But it was like North Korea's marketization was extremely controlled and still very limited. But that was almost just giving the people now to think, oh, there is a life when I take my own control of my life. It's better than relying on government who just promise to take care of everything, but who never does. So now the younger generation has tasted marketization and thirsts for more freedom to being in the market system.
So your conclusion was that there was a direct connection between the act of engaging in free trade, say, at the personal level, and the idea of freedom itself.
Because it forces you to think for yourself when you trade. When you trade, it's not like you're thinking about, oh, how am I gonna like become a better revolutionary for the region? You think for yourself, like how is it gonna benefit me, my family, if I do this? But for North Koreans, thinking for yourself was something so unheard of. Like when we are born, the first thing they teach us how to bow properly and respect. And the first thing that my mom told me as a younger was not to even whisper because the birds and mice could hear me. She told me that the most dangerous thing in my body that I had was my tongue. If you slip out a wrong word, that is end of our like entire family clan. That's how much dangerous your tongue is.
Yes, so you carefully discuss your experiences with free trade and attribute to that the dawning idea of autonomy and individual freedom, whereas the act of trade is deemed illegal and immoral by the totalitarians, and that's associated in some manner with their insistence that private property is theft and that capitalism by its nature, which would include any free trade of any sort, is also corrupt and malevolent.